Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Hannah Namatovu Mukisa and I am the lead nutritionist at Acquire Nutrition Company, where we share with you nutrition tips. And today we are talking about nutrition in bone health. We are talking about the bones. First of all, what is the bone? The bone is an organ of the skeleton. It is a part of the skeleton. The skeleton is that organ that makes up the frame of the body. So the skeleton is made up of a number of bones, and every bone has two types of tissues. First of all, the soft tissue and the hard tissue. The soft tissue is spongy-like. That is what we call the trabecular tissue. The hard tissue is called the cortical tissue. The hard tissue is made up of collagen fibers and calcium and phosphate, which is what we call the hydroxyapatite. It is very, very hard. That is responsible for the hardness of the bone. The hard tissue is the one that is on the outer part of the bone. The soft tissue is in the middle. That is also where we find the bone fluid. Now, you need a lot of calcium in your diet to build up your bones, to build the bone strength. You need to ensure that through your diet you consume throughout your life cycle you consume enough calcium to avoid the diseases of the bones, which are very preventable, such as osteoporosis. Osteoporosis refers to pores in your bones. They are pores. The word porosis comes from pores. So your bone tissue is porous. It has a lot of holes in it, because when the body needs calcium for other purposes, for example, in the blood, there is what we call calcium homeostasis. The blood levels of calcium have to be at a certain level. The amounts of calcium in your blood have to be at a certain level. Now, when it goes down, when it lowers, it reduces, the body has to make sure it gets replenished and it removes the calcium in the bones. So if the calcium is being removed from the bones, also from the kidney, but you're not consuming enough, that means your bones are going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. That is why it is important for you to ensure that you are very, very, very intentional about what you eat. When we see that the whole life cycle of growth, around the age of 18, that is when growth of the bones is considered complete. Around the age of 18, the bone length is known to be complete. 20 for the males, for some males, but that's around that age. Growth is considered complete. But accumulation of bone mass, depositing of the minerals into the bone tissue to ensure increasing of bone mass or hardening of the bones, strengthening of the bones, can go on for some years, up to about the age of 30. Now, the bone as an organ is very dynamic in nature. At any point in time, there is a process going on, a process of bone formation. The minerals are being deposited and bone tissue is being formed, and the process of breakdown or resorption, the minerals are being resorbed. The bone tissue is being broken down to replenish the calcium levels in other parts of the body. So you need to ensure that the process of formation exceeds the process of resorption. If there is a balance, the process of formation is equal to the process of breakdown, the rate, the level, then there is no issue. During growth, the process of formation of bone tissue exceeds the process of breakdown of bone tissue. However, with aging, we get to a point where the process of breakdown of bone tissue exceeds the process of formation. Now, there are cells responsible for these two processes. The cells responsible for formation are called osteoblasts, and the cells responsible for breakdown are called osteoclasts. These processes are determined by hormones. The hormones that are released by the glands, such as PTH, calcitriol. They onset the processes that lead to breakdown of the bone tissue to produce the calcium. And then there are other hormones, so especially the reproductive hormones. They onset the processes that enhance formation of bone tissue. So when you ensure that you lead an active lifestyle, then you will not, when aging starts and the process of breakdown has started to exceed the process of formation, if you live an active lifestyle, if your physical activity is high, then we can prolong the process of formation. We can prolong it. As it was in growth, it gets prolonged according to your physical activity, according to your diet, according to your hormones, sometimes even your genetics. Those are the things that determine. So physical activity is very, very crucial. Diet is very, very crucial, because especially when it comes to physical activity, the bones are strengthened a lot from physical activity that involves carrying of weights, lifting weights, bearing weights. That is why we see that gravity is also important. It contributes to maintaining our bone strength. If you see astronauts when they go into space, even if just for a few days, they lose bone mass because there is zero gravity up there. They find themselves losing bone mass, and if they don't start engaging in physical activity, being physically active, exercising, they lose bone mass. So it is important to incorporate physical activity into your day-to-day routine, especially if you find yourself living a sedentary lifestyle. Your life is mostly at a desk, you're sitting, your hobbies are lying in bed, sitting around. It is important to ensure that by age 50 you won't be experiencing bone fractures, hip replacements, knee surgery, things such as that. Now, when it comes to the risk factors, we have alcohol onsets, excess consumption of alcohol, excess. It onsets the process of osteoclast activity. The other cells that we talked about that initiate the process of breakdown of bone tissue. Yes. Low body weight, a body mass index of less than 21 kilograms per meter squared. It also predisposes one to loss of bone mass. Low calcium and vitamin D uptake. It exposes an individual to breakdown of bone mass, because remember, calcium is the deposit that is needed to build the bone tissue, especially the hard bone. The bone fluid also has some free calcium ions, but when they're absorbed to replenish the calcium in the blood and they get finished, the system is going to resort to the calcium in the bone tissue, and it will be broken down to release the calcium for it to be utilized in the blood. Yes. Also, conditions such as menopause, especially for women. When you reach menopause, your ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, and estrogen helps a lot in bone formation. Now the bone is no longer having that estrogen to help with bone tissue formation, but remember, there is bone tissue breakdown. That is why around the age of 50, also to about 10 years after 50, that age, that is when women lose bone mass, and by the time they reach about 70, they are so weak. But if you were very, very intentional about preventing these things, you can. Yes. Also, there are some drugs such as corticosteroids. These ones also onset the process of bone depletion. How is it diagnosed? By X-ray. That is where I see it most. There are also other methods, but the most common is X-ray. That is where they diagnose osteoporosis. The nutrition recommendations, first of all, protein is very important, because we talked about the collagen fiber that are made from protein. Yeah, so protein is very, very essential also for building of muscle mass. When you lose muscle mass, also you find yourself predisposed to losing bone tissue and bone mass. It gets broken down. There is a correlation. Energy, it is very important that you have energy giving foods. You need adequate energy to engage in physical activity and ensure strengthening of your bones. You need protein, because it is important in formation of those fibers, the collagen fibers. The minerals, the most important is calcium, like I already mentioned. I cannot emphasize calcium enough because it is the most important mineral in the bones. It is emphasized that we consume our calcium from the diet. We consume it mostly from the diet and not from supplements. So it is important that we consume from the diet, and the sources are milk or dairy and dairy products such as yogurt, cheese, and others, the dairy products that you know. Those are very good sources of calcium. However, in cases of people who are lactose intolerant, there we recommend supplementation because it is good. Also, there are products that you're going to find in the supermarkets, cereals, very many other products that are fortified with calcium, sometimes even vitamin D. When you read the nutrition facts on the packaging of those products, you will be able to see how much. Also, it is important to see a nutritionist because we calculate for you how much you need, how much you can get in a serving, all those details according to your specialized information, to your personalized information, your weight, your needs. We can tell you such that you don't be guessing around. Yeah, phosphate is also important. Like I said, it is what binds with the calcium to form that hard substance that is important in formation of the hard bone tissue. But phosphate is found in a lot of foods. It is also found in water. It exists in a lot of foods as phosphate salts. Yeah, so it is hard to be deficient in that. Also, there are trace minerals such as magnesium, zinc. Those ones are also important. There are also those that are bad, such as lead, cadmium. Those ones are bad. They onset the process of bone depletion. They're actually poisonous to the bones. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K. Vitamin A, it is important that you get it from plant sources. It is called retinol. The one that comes from animal sources, it's called carotenoid. That one is not good because it offsets the other process of breakdown of bone tissue. Vitamin D, normally it is gotten from the sun. When the babies are exposed to the sun and the skin synthesizes it. But in adults, the skin has been overexposed to that harsh sunlight that contains ultraviolet rays, and it's no longer producing the vitamin D as efficiently as it did in childhood. So there we recommend that it is got from the diet. The most important source is egg yolk, and then fatty fish, cod liver oil, things like that. Vitamin K, it is also important in collagen formation, those collagen fibers that I talked about. It is so important. Yeah, and it is gotten from green leafy vegetables. Those are the most important sources, and fortified foods. However, it is a contraindicated nutrient, especially in cases of people who are on drugs that are blood thinning. For example, people who are hypertensive and they have put you on blood thinners. Vitamin K also causes clotting, so there is a contraindication that you need to see a medical worker before you start on your vitamin K rich diet. Yeah, fiber is also important in absorption of calcium. Yeah, and vitamin D, like I don't know if I mentioned it, is important in absorption of calcium. When you consume your calcium through your diet, it can be taken up into the blood and into the body only when there is vitamin D. It helps the body to pick it up. So without vitamin D in your diet, your calcium will not be useful. When you consume your calcium rich food, you also need to consume the vitamin D rich foods. Yes. Avoid high acid foods and high alkaline foods, as these affect with the processes such as increasing calcium excretion. Calcium is instead excreted instead of being utilized to form bone tissue. Also, when you have osteoporosis, we recommend that you consume about 1,300 milligrams per day of calcium, 800 international units of vitamin D, Yeah, we recommend that it is from the diet. We recommend that you exercise, aerobic exercise, 5 or more days a week. Yes, we recommend that you incorporate lifting of weights. Yeah, but you need to avoid exercises that cause twisting. We do not want you twisting your back. Yes, and most importantly, see a nutritionist. They will help you. Thank you so much for listening. That was it for today. Until next time, bye.